Evelyn Harper felt the rope bite into her wrists and did not flinch. She stood on the auction platform in the freezing gray dawn, half her face hidden behind a heavy linen veil, while the men of Silver Ridge chanted one word over and over. Cursed. 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 A rotten apple struck her shoulder and burst. She didn't move. But hidden under her ragged dress pressed cold against her ribs hung a dead man's pocket watch, and locked inside it were the names of every powerful man in Colorado who would kill to see her silenced. If this story pulls you in, take a second to subscribe and follow all the way to the end, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from so I can see just how far Evelyn's story travels. Now let's begin. $20, the mayor called out. Who'll start me at $20 for the girl? Nobody answered. Evelyn kept her chin level under the veil. She had learned 4 years ago how to make her body go still, how to swallow her breath so it wouldn't fog the linen and give away that she was crying. She wasn't crying now. She was counting the men in the square the same way her father had taught her to count columns of figures quietly without moving her lips. 31 men, not one of them looking at her like she was a person. Come on now, the mayor said, wiping his nose with the back of a gloved hand. She's young, 25, strong enough to haul water and split kindling. Somebody take her before the snow comes. A miner near the front spat into the mud. Take that, I'd sooner marry my mule. The crowd laughed. At least the mule ain't cursed, another man hollered. More laughter, uglier this time. Evelyn heard it roll toward her like a wave, and she planted her feet against it. She had heard worse. She had heard the word cursed so many times in the last 4 years that it had stopped meaning anything at all. It was just a sound men made when they were afraid of something they didn't understand. She burned down her own family's house, they say. I heard the devil marked her face himself. Whatever she is, I ain't paying good silver for it. The mayor sighed and looked down at the paper in his hand. $10 then. $10 and she's yours, gentlemen. This is your last chance before I send her back to the county. Everyone in the square knew what back to the county meant in the last week of November. It meant the orphan wagon. It meant the long, cold road east, and a girl with no place to sleep, and a winter that killed grown men in their beds. It meant Evelyn Harper would not see spring. She knew it too. She stood a little straighter. $10, the mayor said again, softer. The wind moved through the square. Somewhere a horse stamped and blew, and then from the back of the crowd a low voice said, I'll take her. The whole square turned at once. A man was walking up the center aisle, and the crowd parted for him without being asked. He was taller than any 2 men there put together, it seemed, with a heavy fur coat crusted white at the shoulders and a beard gone gray at the edges. He moved slow. He moved like a man who had never in his life had a reason to hurry. The mayor's jaw came loose. Boone, he said. Mayor. Didn't expect to see you down off the mountain. Figured that? Elias Boone stopped at the foot of the platform. He did not look up at Evelyn. He kept his eyes on the mayor. You said $10. Well, yes, but Elias, you don't want this one. There's other arrangements could be made. Decent women in Denver who'd... You said $10, Elias repeated, for the woman on the platform. That the woman... That's her, but... Elias reached into his coat and set a small leather pouch on the table. It landed with a soft, heavy sound that everyone in the square heard because everyone in the square had gone silent. That's gold dust, Elias said. More than 10. Weigh it if you like. I'll take her, and I'll take her now. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then the miner in the front row started to laugh. Boone, you crazy old fool. You come down out of your cave once a year and you spend it on that. Elias turned his head. He looked at the miner for a long, quiet moment. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The miner's laugh dried up in his throat, and he found something very interesting to study down in the mud. Untie her, Elias said to the mayor. The mayor fumbled with the rope. His hands were shaking, and Evelyn couldn't have said whether it was the cold or the man standing in front of him. The knot came loose, and the rope fell away from her wrists, and she brought her arms down slow, working the feeling back into her fingers. "Miss," Elias said. It was the first word he had spoken to her. She looked down at him through the veil. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Then come down off there. Careful. Ice on the steps." She came down. He did not offer her his hand, and she was grateful for that, because a hand offered was a thing that could be pulled back, and she'd had enough of things being pulled back. She reached the mud and stood beside him, and only then did she understand how big he truly was. The top of her head came to the middle of his chest. "You got a coat?" he asked. No. Without a word, he shrugged out of his heavy fur and dropped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her whole. It smelled of wood smoke and pine and something animal, and it was still warm from his body. "Boone, you'll freeze," the mayor said. "I've been cold before." Elias picked up his rifle from where he'd leaned it against the platform. "Ledger's paid mayor. We're square. Now hold on, there's papers to sign. There's a matter of the marriage the preacher's got to. We'll settle it at the church on the way out. Come on, miss." He turned and walked, and Evelyn followed, and the crowd parted for the two of them the same way it had for him alone. She felt their eyes crawling over her. She heard the whispers start up again behind her back, low and hissing. "He'll kill her up there, and nobody'll ever know. Poor devil don't even know what he bought. Cursed woman for a cursed man. Fitting, I say." Evelyn kept walking. Under the borrowed coat, her hand found the small hard shape of the watch against her ribs, and she pressed her palm flat against it the way she did whenever the fear rose up in her. "Not yet," she told it. "Not yet. You're not safe yet." The church was a low building at the edge of town, and the preacher met them at the door, already wringing his hands, having clearly heard the news run ahead of them through the streets. He was a thin, nervous man, with spectacles fogged from the cold. "Mr. Boone," he said, This is most irregular. I'm not certain I can in good conscience." "She willing," Elias said. He didn't ask the preacher. He turned and asked Evelyn. It was the first time in 4 years a man had asked her whether she was willing to do anything at all. She stood there in this doorway with his coat hanging off her shoulders, and she thought about the orphan wagon and the long road east and the winter that killed grown men in their beds. And she thought about this enormous, silent stranger who had set down gold for a woman he had never even seen, and had asked the mayor to untie her before he'd asked anything else. "I'm willing," she said. "There," Elias said. "Read your words, preacher." The preacher read his words. It took less than 5 minutes. He asked Elias if he took this woman, and Elias said, "I do." He asked Evelyn the same, and she said it too, and her voice did not shake, which surprised her. When it was over, the preacher looked from one to the other and swallowed. "You may, that is, you may kiss the—" "That won't be necessary," Elias said. "Thank you, preacher. Sign the paper." Outside, a mule was tied to the church post, loaded down with a winter's worth of supplies: flour, salt coffee, cartridges, a bolt of cloth. Elias checked the load, tightened a strap, and then he stopped and looked at Evelyn, for what she realized was the first time really looked at her, the veil and all. "It's 4 hours up the trail," he said. "Maybe 5 in this snow. You tell me if you can't feel your feet. You hear, don't be brave about it. Frostbite takes your toes before you ever feel it happen. You just say the word and we stop and I'll build a fire." She stared at him. "You're worried about my feet." "I'm worried about all of you. Frostbite's a mean way to lose a body part." He unhitched the mule. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Then you ride and I'll walk and lead. It's steep. You'll walk, 4 hours, in the snow, with no coat." "I told you, I've been cold before." He held the mule steady. "Up you get, miss." She didn't move. "Why? Why what? Why did you buy me?" The words came out harder than she'd meant them to. 4 years of it all at once. "You've heard what they say. You heard them just now. Cursed. The devil's mark. Burned my own family's house. You didn't even ask to see my face. You put down gold for a woman under a veil like you were buying a horse you couldn't inspect. So why?" Elias was quiet for a moment. The snow came down between them. "You want the truth?" "I'd prefer it. I've lived alone 11 years, he said. Long time to be alone. And I heard there was a woman down here nobody wanted. And I got to thinking that made two of us. Nobody wanted me either, miss. Difference is, I chose the mountain. You didn't choose that platform." He shrugged. "Seemed to me the least a man could do was give somebody a choice she never got. That's all. You can climb down off that mule right now and walk back to town and I won't stop you. But it's cold up there in the county and it's warm at my place. And I don't ask questions and I don't lie. That's the whole of it." Evelyn looked at him for a long time. Then she put her foot in the stirrup and pulled herself up onto the mule. "I don't lie either," she said quietly. "Mr. Boone, you should know that about me." "Good," he said, and clicked his tongue, and the mule started forward. "Then we'll get along." They went up out of the settlement into the timber, and the town of Silver Ridge fell away behind them into the falling snow. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the mule's hooves and the creak of the pack straps and the wind moving high up in the pines. An hour in, Evelyn spoke again, and this time her voice was smaller. "They'll talk," she said. "For weeks they'll talk. About the crazy trapper and the cursed bride. You know that. Let 'em. It'll ruin whatever reputation you've got left down there." "Miss." Elias didn't turn around. He kept walking, kept leading. "I ain't been down that mountain but twice in 11 years. Once to bury a man and once today. I don't reckon their talk reaches me up where I live." "Why'd you come down to bury a man?" He was silent a moment. "Old friend of mine, Marshall once. He got sick and he had nobody, so I came down and I put him in the ground. Then I went back up." A pause. "That was 3 years ago. Today's the only time I've been down since." "And you spent it on me." "Reckon I did." Evelyn's hand found the watch again under the coat. She wasn't sure why she said the next thing. Maybe because he'd said he didn't lie, and something in her had gone hungry for 4 years for a person who didn't lie. "Mr. Boone, if I told you that the men in that town aren't the only ones who'd want me gone, that there are men, powerful men, rich men who'd pay a great deal more than $10 in gold to know where I was standing at this moment, would you turn this mule around and take me back?" Elias stopped walking. He stood there in the snow, with the lead rope in his fist, his back to her, and for a long moment he didn't say anything at all. When he finally turned around, his face was very calm and very still, and Evelyn could not read it. "That a fact," he said. "It's a fact. Rich men, powerful men." He nodded slowly like a man confirming something he'd already half suspected. "How many?" "I don't know exactly." "Enough. And they think you're dead." Her breath caught. "How did you—" "Because if they knew you were alive, miss, you wouldn't have been standing on that platform in the open square of a town where anybody could see you." He said it flatly, the way a man states the weather. "A woman who's got powerful men hunting her doesn't stand up on a stage. Not unless she's got no other choice left. Not unless the county wagon was the only door open, and it led straight to a grave anyhow." He looked at her. "That about the size of it." Evelyn stared at him through the veil, and for the first time in 4 years, she felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. It wasn't hope exactly. It was closer to being seen. "You're not what they said you'd be," she whispered. "Neither are you." He turned back to the trail and clicked his tongue at the mule. "We keep moving. Cold's coming on, and we're only halfway." They climbed. The snow thickened and the light began to fail, and Elias walked the whole way with no coat, never once complaining, stopping only to check that Evelyn could still feel her feet. Twice he stopped and made her flex her hands inside the coat's big sleeves. Once he stopped, dug in the pack, and handed up a strip of dried venison without a word, and she ate it under the veil, turned away from him, and he had the grace not to watch. It was full dark when the trail leveled, and a cabin came out of the snow ahead of them, small and low with a stovepipe and one shuttered window and a woodpile stacked higher than a man's head against the eastern wall. "That's it," Elias said. "That's home, such as it is." He helped the mule up the last of the grade, and then he came around to Evelyn's side and stood there. And this time, he did hold up his hand not to grab, just offered palm open, waiting. "Ice on the ground," he said. "Same as the steps this morning. Careful." She looked at the offered hand. She thought about all the hands in her life that had reached for her, and then pulled back, or reached for her, and never let go the way she wanted them to. And she put her hand in his, and he steadied her down off the mule, and the moment her feet were solid on the ground, he let go exactly as she'd hoped, and not quite believed he would. "Go on inside and get warm," he said, already unbuckling the pack. "Door's not locked, never has been. Stove's laid, just needs a match by the hearth. I'll see to the animal and bring in the supplies. And Miss—" He paused, and in the dark, she couldn't see his face, only the great shape of him against the snow. "There's a rule I'll ask you to keep, and only one. You don't ever have to take off that veil. Not for me, not for anybody, not ever, not as long as you live under my roof. You understand me? That's your face, and it's your business, and I'll not ask about it. Now go on in before you freeze." Evelyn Harper stood in the snow outside a stranger's cabin high on a mountain at the edge of the world, married that morning to a man she had known for 6 hours, with a dead man's watch pressed cold against her ribs and the names of killers locked inside it. And for the first time since the night her house burned, she felt her shoulders come down from around her ears. She went inside. She found the match by the hearth, and she lit the fire. The fire caught, and Evelyn Harper knelt in front of it a long time before she trusted her legs to hold her. She heard the door open behind her, heard the thump of the flour sack coming down the coffee, the cartridge boxes, the bolt of cloth. She did not turn around. She kept her hands out toward the flame and listened to the big man move about the cabin, and she noticed that he did not once come near her. He stayed to the far side of the single room stacking the supplies, and when he'd finished, he stood by the door and cleared his throat. "There's one bed," Elias said. "It's yours. I'll take the floor by the stove." "That's your bed. It's yours now." "Mr. Boone, I've slept on colder ground than that floor for the better part of my life, miss. Don't waste worry on me." He hung his rifle on 2 pegs above the door. "You hungry, I'll boil something. You don't have to eat where I can see you. I'll set the bowl on the table and go see to the mule again, and you eat in your own time. That suit you?" She looked at him. In the firelight he was less a monster and more a tired man, and she understood suddenly that he had thought this through, all of it, on the 4-hour walk up the mountain in the cold with no coat. He had worked out how a woman who couldn't stand to be looked at might eat a meal. He had solved it like a problem quietly, and he was handing her the answer without making her ask. "That suits me," she said. He fed her that way the first night and the second and the third. He would cook, set the bowl down, and find some reason to be outside or turned away, and she would lift the veil in the safety of the empty air and eat. She began to understand the shape of the man from the things he did not say. He did not ask about her face. He did not ask about the powerful men. He did not ask about the things she'd said on the trail, though she knew he was turning it over somewhere behind those still gray eyes. On the 4th morning, she woke to the sound of him splitting wood, and she lay in the bed that smelled of him, and listened to the steady bite of the axe, and she thought, "I could stay here." The thought frightened her more than the men hunting her did. Fear of those men she understood. This other thing she did not. She got up and put on the dress and pinned the veil and went to the door and opened it. "You used the axe wrong," she called out. Elias stopped mid-swing and looked over. "That's so. You're swinging from your shoulders. You'll wear yourself out by noon. My father split all our wood after the hired man left. He swung from the hips, let the axe do the falling, and he was 60 and thin as a rail, and he never tired." Elias considered this. He set another round on the block, adjusted his grip, and swung from the hips. The wood split clean and easy. He grunted. "Your father was a smart man," he said. "He was the smartest man I ever knew." Evelyn came out onto the frozen ground, wrapping her arms around herself. He could look at a ledger a foot thick and find the one number that was wrong in about the time it takes to read this sentence. A bookkeeper. An accountant. There's a difference, he used to say. A bookkeeper writes down what happened. An accountant knows what it means. She watched him split 3 more rounds. You really do listen. Most men don't. I tell them a thing, and they nod, and it goes right through them like water through a sieve. You changed how you swing an axe because a woman told you to. Elias set down the axe and wiped his brow with his sleeve. Woman was right. Why would I keep doing it wrong out of pride? Pride's a fool's blanket. Keeps you warm and lets you freeze at the same time. He picked up an armful of split wood. You want to make yourself useful. There's a coffee pot on the stove, and I take it black. She made the coffee. It became a thing they did. He split the wood, and she made the coffee, and they drank it, standing on the frozen ground, looking out at the white world, not talking. And it was the first easy silence she'd stood inside in 4 years. It was the second week when he found the law book. He'd gone out before light to run his trap line, and Evelyn had thought she had the morning to herself, and she'd taken the book out from where she kept it wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom of her small bundle. She was deep in it, sitting at the table, her lips moving over the words when the door opened, and he came in, stamping snow off his boots 2 hours earlier than she'd expected. She snapped the book shut. Too late. Commentaries on American Law. Elias read off the spine before she could cover it. He shut the door slow. Kent's Commentaries. That's 4 volumes. Lawyers keep those. Judges. He set down the frozen carcass of a rabbit on the sideboard and did not take his eyes off the book. What's a mountain trapper's wife doing with Volume 2 of Kent's Commentaries? Reading it, Evelyn said. I can see you're reading it. I'm asking why. Because I have a use for it. She lifted her chin under the veil. You said you didn't ask questions, Mr. Boone. I said I didn't ask about your face. He hung up his coat. I didn't say a word about the rest of you, and the rest of you is turning stranger by the day, miss. And a man notices strange things happening under his own roof, whether he means to or not. He crossed to the table and stood over the book, but did not touch it. You read law. You quote your father, the federal accountant. You told me on the trail that rich and powerful men would pay to know where you're standing. I've been chewing on all of that for 2 weeks, and it don't add up to a cursed woman from an orphanage. It adds up to something else entirely. And what does it add up to? Trouble, Elias said. The kind that follows a person up a mountain if you're not careful. Evelyn was quiet. Then she stood and she walked to the corner where he kept his gun belt on a peg, and before he could say a word, she'd drawn the revolver, checked the cylinder with a snap of her wrist, and set it back exactly as she'd found it. Elias watched her do it and did not move. You want to know what I am, she said. I'll show you. Do you have a target? He took her out back, where a row of fence posts stood capped with snow, and without a word, he thumbed 6 cartridges into her palm. She loaded the revolver, the way a woman threads a needle without looking at her hands, her eyes on the posts. She raised the gun. 6 shots. 6 caps of snow blew off 6 posts in the time it took Elias to draw a single breath. The echo rolled away down the mountain and came back and died. Elias Boone stood very still. My father hired a Pinkerton man to guard our house the last year of his life. Evelyn said, breaking the revolver open, ejecting the spent brass into her hand, one at a time catching each. He was bored, and I was curious, and he taught me to shoot the way the agency taught him. He said I had a gift for it. He said it was a shame, a gift like that on a girl, because I'd never have call to use it. She snapped the cylinder closed and held the empty gun out to Elias, grip first. He was wrong about that. Elias took the gun. Who was your father, Evelyn? It was the first time he'd used her name. She heard it, and something in her chest gave way, some door she'd been holding shut with both hands for 4 years, and she was suddenly so tired of holding it. She sat down right there on the frozen woodpile. His name was Thomas Harper, she said. You won't have heard of him. Nobody was supposed to hear of him. That was the whole point of him. He was a federal auditor for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad expansion, and he was so good at his work and so quiet about it that the men above him forgot he was there. And that was their mistake, Mr. Boone, because my father found something. Found what? A hole. She stared at the snow. $2 million of federal land grant money that went into the railroad and never came out the other side. Payments for track that was never laid. Wages for workers who never existed. Bribes to a territorial judge, to 2 land commissioners, to a United States senator's brother. And every dollar of it flowed in the end into the pocket of one man. She looked up. A cattle baron named Nathan Crowley. My father spent a year building the case. He had it all. Names, dates, amounts, the whole rotten structure of it. And he was going to Washington to testify before a Senate committee. He had the tickets bought. Elias's face had gone strange, very white, very still. What happened? You know what happened. Everyone knows what happens to a man like that. Her voice was flat now, the flatness of a thing worn smooth by repetition inside her own head. 3 nights before he was to leave, 4 men came to our house. I was upstairs. I heard my mother scream and I ran to the top of the stairs and I saw them. I saw them shoot my father where he sat at his own desk with his case files in front of him. And then they set the fire. They set it to burn the papers and the house and everyone in it so it would look like an accident. A lamp knocked over. A tragedy. So sad. Evelyn, I went back for the strongbox. She wasn't crying. She was somewhere past crying in the cold, flat country beyond it. That's how I got this. She raised one hand toward the veil, not lifting it, just touching the linen. The strongbox was in my father's study, and the study was already burning, and I went in anyway, because he'd told me 100 times, if anything ever happens to me, the box, Evelyn, the box before anything. And I was 17, and I did what my father told me. I got the box. I got out through the back. And half of me was on fire when I did it, and I rolled in the snow and I lived. She lowered her hand. My mother and father did not. Elias had lowered himself down onto the woodpile beside her without her noticing. He was staring straight ahead at the shot-off fence posts. The strongbox, he said. What was in it? Everything burned. All the papers, all my father's year of work gone to ash inside the study before I could reach the box. When I finally got it open, weeks later, hiding in a barn 40 miles east, there was nothing inside but a little money and 1 pocket watch. She reached into her collar and drew it out on its chain and held it in her open palm. Gold dented the crystal cracked across one corner. This. A watch that doesn't tell time. She pressed the stem and the back sprang open, and Elias leaned in, and inside, where the works of a watch should be, there was no works at all. Only paper. Layer on layer on layer of onion skin paper, folded impossibly small, packed tight into the case, every inch of it covered edge to edge in tiny, precise, handwritten figures and letters. He built it himself, Evelyn said softly. My father. Over the last month, when he knew they were watching him, when he knew they might take the papers. He copied the whole case down into a cipher. Only he and I knew he taught it to me as a game. When I was a little girl, I never knew why I thought it was just a game, and he hid it in a watch because who searches a dead girl's watch? Every name is in here, Mr. Boone, Crowley, the judge, the commissioners, the senator's brother, every payment, every date, every bribe. 4 years I've carried the only surviving evidence of what they did. 4 years I've kept it against my body every hour of every day, because the moment they know it exists, the moment they know I exist, they will come, and they will not stop. And there is not a lawman in this whole territory brave enough or clean enough to stand against Nathan Crowley. She closed the watch. She looked at the big, silent man beside her. So now you know what you bought for $10 in gold, she said. You bought the most hunted woman in Colorado. You can still take me back down. I'd understand it. I truly would. For a long time, Elias Boone did not speak. When he finally did, his voice had changed. It had gone low and rough, like something dragged up from deep in a well. Say the name again, he said. Which name? The lawman. You said there wasn't a lawman brave enough, but there was a case. A federal case before your father. Somebody was investigating the railroad money before your father ever found the hole, wasn't there? Evelyn went still. How could you know that? Because there was a man, Elias said. He was staring at his own hands now, at the scars across the knuckles, turning them over slow. 4 years ago, and more. There was a United States deputy marshal working out of Denver, and he caught the first thread of it, federal land money going somewhere it shouldn't, contracts that didn't make sense, and he started pulling. And the more he pulled, the higher it went, until one day his own superiors called him into a room and told him to stop pulling. And when he wouldn't stop, he stopped himself. Evelyn's whole body had turned toward him. When he wouldn't stop, what? They framed him, Elias said. They put stolen bank money in his cabin. They put a dead witness's watch in his saddlebag. A watch, Evelyn. That's why when you pulled that thing out, I nearly... He shut his eyes. They swore out affidavits. 6 men who'd never met him swore he'd taken bribes and killed a man to cover it. They took his badge. They ran him out of the marshals with a rope, waiting if he ever came back down into any town where the paper on him was posted. He was 34 years old, and he'd given his whole life to the law, and they burned it to the ground in one afternoon because he got too close to Nathan Crowley's money. The wind moved through the pines. Neither of them breathed. "That man?" Evelyn whispered. "That marshal. What was his name?" Elias Boone turned his head and looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was something naked in his face, something that had been buried under 11 years of snow and silence. "Elias Boone," he said. The man's name was Elias Boone. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth beneath the veil. "The friend I came down to bury 3 years ago," Elias went on, and now the words came faster, the dam broken, 4 years spilling out of him, the same way 4 years had just spilled out of her. "He wasn't just some old marshal. He was my partner, Evelyn, Sam Reed. He was the only man in the whole territory who believed I'd been framed, the only one who stood up in that courtroom and said Elias Boone never took a dollar in his life. And it cost him everything, too. They couldn't frame him, so they broke him. Took his post, his pension, ran him out. He drank himself half to death in a shack outside Silver Ridge, and I came down and buried him, and I swore over his grave that I was through. Through with the law. Through with the fight. Because we had lost. Crowley had won, and there was nothing on this earth left to prove I'd ever been anything but the thief they said I was." He stood up suddenly, and it was like watching a mountain move. "And then..." His voice cracked. "And then I walked down that hill on a whim one time in 3 years to spend a little gold before the snow. And I hear there's a woman nobody wants. And I buy her out of pity, out of pure fool pity, and I bring her up my mountain, and she pulls a dead man's watch out of her dress and tells me it's full of the names of the men who took everything from me." He turned and looked at her. "You understand what you're carrying, Evelyn? You're not just carrying the evidence that clears your father. You're carrying the evidence that clears me. My name is in that watch. It has to be. The framing, the money they moved to bury me, Crowley did it, and your father tracked every dollar Crowley moved. I'm in there. Somewhere in that cipher is the proof that I was never a thief, that I told the truth, that they lied." Evelyn stood up too. Her hands were shaking now, but not from the cold. "For 4 years," she said slowly, "I have carried this thing against my body and prayed to God to send me one honest man. One. A lawman I could trust with it. A marshal who wasn't bought. And every single one I looked at was Crowley's, or too afraid or too weak, and I gave up. I stopped praying. I decided I'd carry it to my grave and let it burn with me." She took a step toward him. "And then a mountain drops a disgraced federal marshal into my lap for $10 in gold. A marshal who was framed by the very same man. A marshal whose innocence is written inside my own watch." They stood facing each other in the snow. "Mr. Boone," she said, "I don't believe in curses anymore, but I am beginning to believe in something." "Don't," Elias said roughly. "Don't say it. Don't make it holy. If it's holy and it goes wrong, I couldn't stand it." He turned away, dragged a hand down his face. "You have to understand something. I quit. I made my peace. I've got a cabin and a trap line, and I intended to die up here old and forgotten. And that was going to be enough. Because the alternative is going back down that mountain and picking up a fight. I already lost once. A fight that cost Sam his life and me everything I ever was. And now you're standing here asking me to— I'm not asking you anything, Evelyn said. You are. You're asking with your whole self standing there. No. She said it hard. I have never in 4 years asked a man for a single thing, Elias Boone, and I'm not going to start with you. I am telling you what I have. What you do about it is your own affair. I can decode that watch myself. I don't need you to fight my war. I've kept myself alive this long without one soul to help me, and I'll keep going alone if I have to, all the way to Washington on my own 2 feet with this watch sewn into my hem. She was breathing hard. I told you the truth because you told me you don't lie, and I decided to believe you, and because a person cannot carry a thing like this forever with no one in the whole world knowing it's real. That's all. That's the only thing I wanted. For one other living person to know I'm not cursed, that my face got burned saving the truth, that I'm not the devil's woman, I'm Thomas Harper's daughter, and I did what my father told me, and I lived. Her voice broke on the last word, and she hated it, and she turned her face away so he wouldn't see even the veil trembling. She heard him cross the snow. She felt him stop a foot away. He did not touch her. He never touched her without asking. She'd learned that about him, and he didn't now. Evelyn Harper, Elias said quietly. Look at me. She turned. You're not cursed, he said. You're the bravest person I have ever stood next to, and I have stood next to some hard, brave men. What you did at 17, going into a burning house for your father's box, there's marshals with 20 years' service wouldn't have the sand to do it. You are not the devil's woman. You're a Harper, and your father would be so proud of you, it'd break his heart. The tears came, then hot behind the veil, and she let them. But I'm going to ask you for one thing back, Elias went on, and you can say no, same as I've always given you the say. I'm going to ask you to let me stand with you. Not because I owe you, not because my name's in that watch, though it is, because for 11 years I have been a dead man walking around in a live man's body, and you just put a reason back in my chest, and a man doesn't get many of those. Sam Reed died believing we'd lost. If there's any chance at all of walking back down that mountain and proving Sam was right about me all along, of nailing Nathan Crowley to the wall with the truth, then I wanted Evelyn. God help me. I want it more than I've wanted anything since they took my badge. He held out his open hand, palm up, the way he'd offered it the first night. So, partners, not husband and wife. That was $10 and a nervous preacher, and it don't signify. Partners. In this. All the way to the end of it, whatever the end turns out to be. Evelyn looked at the offered hand. The scarred knuckles. The hand of a man who'd been broken and had not broken. She put her hand in his. Partners, she said. And this time, neither of them let go. They went inside out of the cold, and for the rest of that day, and long into the night, they did not sleep. They lit every lamp in the cabin, and Elias moved the table into the center of the room, and Evelyn opened the watch, and for the first time in 4 years, spread its secret out into the light of the world. You said it's a cipher, Elias said, leaning over the tiny folded papers as she smoothed them flat. Your father taught it to you as a game, a substitution game with a shifting key. She anchored the corners of the first sheet with a spoon, a knife, a cup, a stone. The key changes every 7th entry. He built it that way on purpose. Anyone who cracked the first 6 lines would think they had it, and then it would turn to gibberish and they'd give up. He was very clever, my father. Cleverer than the men who killed him. That's why they had to kill him. They couldn't outthink him. How long to read the whole thing? Weeks, maybe longer. It's the entire case, Elias. Every transaction going back 3 years. She bent close to the paper, and Elias fetched the lamp closer, and she began to read. She read the names first. She read them out loud one by one, and with each name, Elias's face changed. Judge Harlan Vance, she read. He signed the warrant that put the stolen money in my cabin, Elias said. Vance, God Almighty. Land Commissioner Pruitt, Land Commissioner Wallace. Wallace testified against me. Swore under oath he saw me take a bribe in a saloon I've never set foot in. There's a figure by his name, a date. $600 paid the second week of that same month. Evelyn looked up. Elias, he was paid $600 to lie about you. It's written right here in your enemy's own accounting. Elias put both fists on the table and leaned on them and shut his eyes and breathed. Keep reading, he said hoarsely. She kept reading. Hours passed. The lamp burned low, and Elias trimmed the wick without being asked and never once suggested they stop. And somewhere near 2 a.m, Evelyn went very quiet, and her finger stopped moving on the page. What? Elias said. What is it? There's a payment here. Her voice had changed. It's large. It's the largest single payment in the whole ledger, larger than anything paid to the judge or the commissioners. And it's not to any of them. She looked up slowly. It's marked only with initials. And a note. My father made a note beside it, the only note in the whole thing that isn't just figures. Read it. This one I cannot prove yet. But if I am right about who these initials belong to, then Crowley does not stand at the top of this. There is someone above him. Someone in Washington. And that man is the one who will kill us all. The cabin was dead silent. Initials, Elias said. What initials? Evelyn stared at the page. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. A CT. Elias's head came up. That means something to you. I can see it does. It means... She stopped. She pressed her fingers to her lips beneath the veil. There's only one man in the entire territory those initials could belong to if my father meant a man in Washington, a man above even Crowley. Augustus Crane Thorne, the territorial delegate to Congress. The man they say will be the first governor when Colorado becomes a state. The most powerful, most beloved, most untouchable man west of the Mississippi. She looked up at Elias with something like terror in her eyes. My father thought Nathan Crowley was the top of it. Everyone thinks Crowley's the top of it. But my father in his last days started to wonder if Crowley was just the hand, and that the head was a man so far above suspicion that no jury in this country would ever convict him. Augustus Thorne. You said this note is 4 years old, Elias said slowly. Yes. And your father wrote it wasn't sure. Might be wrong about the initials. Yes. Then here's what we do. Elias straightened up. There was a new hardness in him now, the hardness of a lawman getting the shape of a case, a thing she would come to know very well. We don't touch Thorne, not yet, maybe not ever. A man like that, you go at him with a maybe, and a note in a dead man's handwriting, he'll have you buried before sundown and mourn you at the funeral. We build the case we can build. Crowley, the judge, the commissioners, the names your father proved cold. We take those down first in the open, in front of the whole territory, so loud and so public that even if Thorne is behind it, he can't reach down and snuff it out without the whole world seeing his hand do it. You understand? We make it too big to kill. That's the only way to fight a man that powerful. You don't fight him quiet. You fight him where everyone's watching. Evelyn stared at him. You really were a marshal. I really was. He almost smiled. First useful thought I've had in 11 years. Feels strange. They worked until dawn, grayed the shuttered window, and then Elias made Evelyn lie down while he kept the fire, and she slept 4 hours, and woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of him moving quiet so as not to wake her. And for one moment, before she remembered everything, she was simply a woman, waking warm in a safe place, and it was the finest moment she'd had in 4 years. The days that followed had a rhythm to them. Elias ran his trapline at dawn because a man had to eat, and Winter didn't care about justice. Evelyn decoded the watch by day and by lamplight, and in the afternoons Elias began to teach her. You can shoot, he said the first afternoon out back by the ruined fence posts. Better than me, and that galls me some, I won't lie. But shooting a fence post ain't the same as shooting a man who's shooting at you. When it's real, your hands shake and your mouth goes dry and your ears ring and you can't hardly think. I'm going to teach you how to shoot anyhow, how to shoot scared. Because if Crowley's men ever climb this mountain scared is all you're going to be, and you'll need to shoot straight through it. You think they'll find us? I think a woman with a $2 million watch should plan for it. He set a can on the post. Now, I'm going to yell in your ear and throw snow in your face and make it as ugly as I know how, and you're going to hit that can anyway. You ready? No. Good, that's honest. Draw. He taught her to shoot scared. He taught her to reload with cold hands and no light. He taught her to move through the cabin in the dark where the loose board was which shutter stuck. How to bar the door in 3 seconds. He taught her the mountain, the trap line, the tree line, the old mine tunnels that ran under the whole ridge like the burrows of some enormous animal. Sam and I found these tunnels years back, he said one afternoon, holding a torch up in the cold black throat of an old shaft. Silver played out in the 50s they abandoned the works, but the tunnels run for miles. Come out 3 places I know of. A man could disappear down here. A man could lose an army down here if he knew the ways, and they didn't. He looked at her. You remember this, Evelyn. If it ever comes to it, and we get separated, you come to this shaft, this one, the one with the split pine over the mouth. You go down, and you go left and right, and you'll come out a mile east above the creek. You hear me? Left, right. Left, right, she repeated. Why are you telling me this like you're going to die? Because everybody dies, Elias said simply. And a good plan, don't care whether I'm alive to see it through. He put out the torch. Left, right, say it in your sleep. And in the evenings when the work was done and the watch was put away safe, something else began to happen so slow that neither of them marked the day it started. They began to talk. Not about Crowley, not about the case. About other things. About her mother who'd played piano and burned every supper and laughed at her own cooking. About Sam Reed, who'd cheated at cards so badly and so obviously that it had become a kind of joke, a thing you let him get away with because watching him try was worth the nickel. About the mountain in summer, which Elias described in his short, flat way, and which Evelyn, who had only ever seen it white, tried to picture. About the years Elias had spent alone up here, and the way a man's own voice starts to sound strange to him when he goes long enough without using it. I talked to the mule for a while, he admitted one night, and Evelyn laughed. Actually laughed a real one, the first he'd heard from her, and he looked so pleased and so startled by the sound that she laughed harder. You did not talk to the mule. Told her all my troubles. She's a good listener. Never once gave me bad advice. He was almost smiling. You've got a good laugh, Evelyn. You ought to use it more. She stopped laughing. Her hand went out of 4 years of habit toward the veil. Don't, Elias said gently. I didn't mean it to make you shy. I meant it kind. I know you did. She lowered her hand. That's what makes it hard. When people were cruel, it was easy. Cruelty I know how to stand against. Kindness I've got no armor for. She was quiet a moment. You've never once asked to see my face. And I never will. I know, that's... She struggled for it. In 4 years, no one has let me keep a single thing that was mine. Not my name, not my past, not my father's good name. Nothing. And you gave me back the one thing I never even thought to ask for. The right to my own face, to decide who sees it. She looked at him across the lamplight. Why? Because it's yours, Elias said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. A person's face is theirs. Wasn't ever a question in my mind. Evelyn Harper looked at this enormous, gentle, ruined man across a rough table in a cabin at the top of the world, and she felt the thing she'd been afraid of for 2 weeks finally arrive quiet as snow and settle over her heart. She did not have a word for it yet. She was not ready for the word. But she felt it come, and she did not push it away. The days grew shorter, the decoding grew longer, and one afternoon in the 3rd week, Elias came back from his trap line early and quiet, and Evelyn knew the moment he stepped through the door that something had changed. What is it? She said, standing up from the watch. There's tracks. He unslung his rifle. Down at the tree line. 2 horses, maybe 3, come up the east trail yesterday from the look of the snow over them and stopped and turned back. Evelyn's blood went cold. Hunters. Nobody hunts this high in winter. Nobody comes up the East Trail at all. It's the hard way, unless they don't want to be seen coming up the main one. He met her eyes. They didn't come to the cabin. They stopped short and looked and went back down, like they were making sure of something before they committed to it. Making sure I'm here. Making sure of the ground. How many of us? Where the cabin sits. Whether there's a back way. He set the rifle on its pegs. Somebody's scouting us, Evelyn. Somebody who plans careful. And that scares me a good deal worse than somebody who just comes shooting because it means whoever sent them isn't a fool. Evelyn looked down at the watch at the 4 years of her life spread across the table in tiny cipher. Then she looked at the corner where the note lay, the note in her father's hand. This one I cannot prove yet. There is someone above him. How much of the watch have I decoded? She asked. 2/3 near enough. Then I need to finish it. Her voice was steady now, steadier than she felt. Fast, before they come. Because if they take us, and it's not decoded, it dies with us, and it's just gibberish in a broken watch, and my father died for nothing, and Sam Reed died for nothing, and we die for nothing too. She sat back down at the table, and pulled the lamp close, and picked up her pencil. Watch the tree line, Elias. I'll watch the watch. He watched the tree line. She watched the watch. And in the last light of that short, cold day high on a mountain that had gone from a hiding place to a trap, a disgraced marshal and a woman the world had thrown away raced a cipher against the men coming up the mountain to kill them, both of them. Knowing without either one saying it, that the easy days were over, and that whatever came next would come with the snow, and with guns, and with blood. Evelyn's pencil moved. A new name surfaced out of the cipher. She stopped. Elias. I'm watching. There's another payment. Recent. This one's dated only 2 months ago. My father's dead 4 years. This can't be his hand, but it's in the same book. Someone kept adding to it. She was talking fast now, her mind racing ahead of her mouth. No, that's not possible. The watch has been against my body 4 years. No one's touched it. No one could have added. She turned the tiny paper, turned it again, and went absolutely white beneath the veil. Elias, this entry. It's in my father's cipher. The exact cipher. The shifting key and everything. But my father has been dead 4 years. Elias came away from the window. What are you saying? I'm saying my father taught that cipher to exactly 2 people in this world. Her hand was shaking. Me. And one other. When I was small, before all of it, there was a game the 3 of us played. She looked up at him, and her eyes were huge and wild. My father. Me. And my brother. You don't have a brother, Elias said slowly. You told me they all died in the fire. Your father, your mother. I had a brother. Evelyn's voice cracked down the middle. Daniel. He was 14 years older. He left home when I was 6. We had a falling out with him. My father never spoke his name again, and I always thought. She pressed the paper to her chest. Elias. This entry is written in my father's private cipher dated 2 months ago in a watch no living hand has touched but mine. Which means somewhere out there right now is a man who knows the cipher. A man my father taught. A man who's still adding names to this ledger from the outside, from the inside, from somewhere. Her breath came in gasps. My brother is alive, and he's part of this. And I don't know which side he's on. The wind rose outside, and somewhere far down the mountain, faint and thin, came the sound the 2 of them had been listening for without ever saying it aloud. The distant, patient, unhurried sound of horses climbing the east trail in the dark. Evelyn's hand closed around the watch. Elias took down his rifle, and neither one of them said a single word. How many? Evelyn breathed. Elias stood at the shuttered window with one eye to the crack, and his stillness was worse than any shout. 4. Coming slow. They've dismounted below the tree line and left the horses. Men who dismount to come the last stretch on foot are men who mean to kill quiet. He stepped back from the window. Blow out the lamp." She blew it out. The cabin went black. "They think they're sneaking," Elias said in the dark, and there was something almost like relief in his voice, the relief of a man who has been waiting 11 years for a fight to come, find him, and has finally heard it on the stairs. That's their first mistake. A man sneaking is a man who thinks he's got surprise. We're going to give it back to him with interest. "Where's the watch?" "Against my ribs, where it always is." "Keep it there. That watch leaves this cabin on your body, or not at all." She heard him moving sure-footed in the dark he'd taught her, and then the small sounds of the rifle being checked, the revolver, the second revolver, he pressed into her hands. "You loaded. Loaded. You remember what I taught you? Shoot scared." "Left. Left, right," she said, and heard him almost laugh. "That's the tunnels, not the shooting, but I'll take it. You remembered." His hand found her shoulder in the dark just once, just briefly. "Evelyn, whatever happens, you don't die for me, and I don't die for you. We both live. That's the plan. The watch and the two of us off this mountain alive. Everything else is nothing. You hear, I hear. Then let's teach these men something about the ground they're walking on." He'd prepared the ground for weeks without ever saying so. Evelyn understood it now, in a rush the afternoons he'd spent out back doing she knew not what. The way he'd cleared certain sight lines, and left others blind, the tripcord he'd strung ankle-high between two stumps, that he now reminded her of with a single word. "The cord's live," he whispered. "First man through the yard finds it. When he goes down, that's your signal, but you don't shoot at the sound. You shoot at the muzzle flash of the man behind him, because there's always a man behind him, and he'll fire at where he thinks we are, and he'll light himself up doing it. You shoot the light, not the sound. The light. The light? Not the sound." Good girl. They waited in the dark. Evelyn's heart slammed so hard, she was sure they could hear it down at the tree line. Her mouth had gone to ash, exactly as Elias had warned her it would, and her hands wanted to shake, and she pressed them flat against the cold stock of the revolver, and made them still by force of will, and she thought, "Shoot scared. He taught me to shoot scared, and scared is all I am." A boot found the tripcord. The crash of the falling man was enormous in the silence, a grunt and a clatter, and a curse bitten off half-spoken, and before it had finished, a second man's gun barked from the yard. The muzzle flashed a yellow tongue in the dark, and Evelyn did not think, did not aim, only turned to the light, the way Elias had drilled into her 100 times and fired twice. A cry. The light went out. "Hit!" Elias breathed beside her. "Down and hit. Move. Don't stay where you fired. Move." They moved, and the yard erupted. The two men still standing opened up on the cabin, and the shutters splintered, and lead sang through the dark over their heads and buried itself in the far wall. And Evelyn crawled where Elias pulled her behind the iron stove that he'd known would stop a bullet. And she understood that every single thing this man had done for 3 weeks, the loose board, the barred shutters, the stove placed just so, had been him quietly building a fortress around a woman he'd bought for $10 in case of exactly this night. "They'll rush the door now," Elias said, calm as a man discussing weather. "2 of them, 1 high, 1 low. It's how they're trained. I take the high. You take the low. You'll want to shoot at his chest. Shoot lower. Fear makes you shoot high. Aim at his belt, and you'll hit his chest." The door came off its hinges. 2 shapes filled the doorway against the snow glow behind one. Standing one crouched, and Elias's rifle spoke once, and the standing man folded, and Evelyn aimed at the crouched man's belt, and fired, and he went down across the threshold, and did not move. And then there was silence, ringing, enormous silence, and the smell of powder, and Evelyn realized she was screaming and made herself stop. "That's 4, Elias said. 2 down in the yard, 2 in the door, unless there's more below." He was already moving toward the doorway, low and fast, rifle up. "Stay behind the stove. I'm going to make sure of them." "Elias." "Stay." He went out into the ruined doorway, and Evelyn crouched behind the stove with her heart in her throat. And she heard him check the 2 men on the threshold, heard him move out into the yard, and she waited, counting her own breaths. And then she heard the thing that stopped her heart cold. A fifth gun, from behind the cabin. From the one direction Elias hadn't warned her about, because it was the sheerest the direction no man could climb. A man had climbed it. "Elias!" she screamed. "Behind you! The back!" The shot and her scream came together, and she heard Elias grunt that same bitten-off sound the tripped man had made, and she was up and moving, before she'd decided to move out from behind the stove, out through the shattered door into the yard, and she saw him. Elias was down on one knee in the snow. A big man stood over him with a gun. A man who'd come around the blind side, and Elias had a hand pressed to his own side, and dark was spilling between his fingers, and the man over him was saying something gloating, something taking his time, the way cruel men do, and it was that half-second of taking his time that killed him. Evelyn shot him through the chest at 15 feet. He was dead before he finished his sentence. Then she was on her knees in the snow beside Elias, her hands over his hands over the wound, and the fear she'd held down through the whole fight came up all at once and nearly drowned her. "No," she said. "No, no, you said we both live. You said that was the plan. You don't get to change the plan. Ain't dead yet." His voice was tight with pain, but his eyes were clear. "Went through. In and out high on the side. Missed the vitals or I'd already be gone. Hurts like the devil's own fire, but it won't kill me tonight if you do what I tell you." He gripped her wrist. "Evelyn, listen. Are they all down? Count them. 2 yard, 2 door, this one's 5. Was there 5 men? Then there's more coming." He tried to stand, and his face went gray, and he sat back down hard. "5's a scouting party, not an army. Whoever sent these men will send more when these don't come back down the mountain. We can't stay. We can't stay. Evelyn, do you understand me? This cabin's a coffin now. They know exactly where it is. You can't walk. Look at you, you can't. I can walk to the tunnel, the split pine shaft, left, right." He was pressing something into her hand, a folded cloth, a strip torn from a shirt. "Pack the wound, both sides, tight enough to hurt, or it's not tight enough. Then help me up, and we go before the cold takes what the bullet didn't." She packed the wound. She made it tight enough to hurt. He hissed and cursed and told her she'd have made a fine field surgeon, and to pull it tighter, and she did. And she got her shoulder under his arm. He was so heavy, God, he was so heavy. And she got him up, and together they staggered away from the cabin that had been the only safe place she'd known in 4 years, out into the black timber toward the split pine and the throat of the mountain. They did not look back. There was nothing behind them but dead men and a broken door and everything ahead of them in the dark. The tunnel took them in. It was blacker than the night outside, a cold that had never known sun, and Elias could not hold the torch and stay upright at the same time. So Evelyn held it and she led, and he leaned on her, and she recited under her breath the litany he'd made her memorize. "Left," she said at the first branching, and took it. "Left." Elias's voice was getting thick. He was bleeding through the packing. She could feel the warmth of it against her side, where his arm crossed her shoulders. "You're doing fine. Left again." "Left." She took it. The tunnel narrowed and the roof came down, and they stooped and shuffled, and somewhere far behind them, echoing and distorted, they heard it voices. More men. In the cabin. In the yard. And then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of the voices coming into the tunnel behind them. "They found the shaft?" Elias breathed. "Somebody knew about the shaft. Somebody told them." His hand tightened on her shoulder. "Faster, Evelyn. The last turn's a right. When we reach it, there's a place Sam and I rigged it years ago. Old blasting powder, a whole magazine of it the miners left. We always meant it as a last card. Right turn, then 20 paces, and there's a lantern hook and a length of fuse. If they follow us past the right turn, we bring the mountain down on them." "That'll bring it down on us too." "Not if we're past the 20 paces, not if we're fast." He stumbled, caught himself on the wall, left a dark handprint she saw in the torchlight, and wished she hadn't. "Right turn, Evelyn. Find me the right turn." She found the right turn. The voices behind them were closer now, and lights bobbed in the dark far back down the tunnel, and she heard a man's voice call out, echoing almost conversational in its confidence. "Miss Harper, Miss Evelyn Harper. No need to run, ma'am. We only want the watch. Give us the watch and you can walk right out of here, you and the trapper both. Nobody else has to get hurt tonight." Evelyn froze for half a heartbeat. They knew her name. They knew about the watch. Someone had told them everything. "Don't answer," Elias whispered. "Don't give them your voice to aim at. 20 paces. Go." She counted the paces in the dark, dragging the wounded weight of him. And at 20, she found it exactly where Sam Reed and Elias Boone had left it years before, against a day they'd hoped would never come, the powder, the fuse, the hook. Elias slid down the wall to sit, his strength finally going, and he pressed the fuse and a tin of matches into her hands. "I can't hold the torch and light it and shoot too," he said. "So here's how it goes. You light the fuse. It's a slow 130 seconds, give or take. You light it and you run, and you don't stop, and you don't look back, and you don't wait for me. I'm not leaving you here. Evelyn, I said I'm not leaving you." She got her shoulder back under his arm and hauled, and something in her voice or her grip must have told him she'd sooner die than argue, because he stopped arguing and got his feet under him. "We both live. You said it. Both of us. Now stand up, Elias Boone. Stand up and walk, because I did not come this far and lose everyone I love twice." He stood up. She struck the match. She lit the fuse. It caught and hissed and began to eat its way toward the powder, a small, bright, angry star crawling in the dark. And they ran. They ran the last stretch of tunnel with the voices roaring behind them. The men breaking into a run, now too close, so close, and the fuse burning down behind all of them, and the mouth of the tunnel appeared ahead as a gray wound in the black dawn-light open air. And they burst out of it into the snow above the creek, exactly where Elias had promised a mile back and a lifetime ago, and they threw themselves down behind a shelf of rock, and Evelyn covered Elias's body with hers, and the mountain went off. The sound was the end of the world. The ground bucked. A gout of dust and smoke and shattered rock blew out of the tunnel mouth like the breath of something enormous and dying, and the whole shoulder of the ridge above the tunnel groaned and shifted and came down 100,000 tons of snow and stone, folding in on itself, sealing the tunnel and everyone still inside it under the weight of the whole mountain. Then silence. A vast, settling, powder-smelling silence. Evelyn lifted her head. Her ears rang. Elias was breathing under her, shallow and fast, but breathing. "Both of us," he whispered. "Told you. Both of us." "Both of us," she said, and then his eyes rolled back and he passed out cold, and the whole weight of what came next fell onto her alone. She was not going to lose him. She had decided that somewhere in the tunnel, and she did not revisit the decision now. She dragged him into the shelter of the rock overhang. She built a fire with hands that would not stop shaking, using every trick he'd taught her, and when it caught, she nearly wept at it. She stripped the ruined packing from his wound and looked at it in the firelight and made herself not look away. "In and out," he'd said. And he'd been right. There were 2 wounds, entry and exit, high on the left side, and the bleeding had slowed, but not stopped. "All right," she said out loud to steady herself, to fill the silence, to feel like there were still 2 of them. "All right, Thomas Harper's daughter. You went into a burning house at 17. You can do this." She heated the blade of his knife in the fire until it glowed. She had read about it in a book once, 100 years ago, in another life. She pressed the flat of the hot blade to the wounds, first one side, then the other. And Elias came screaming up out of his faint, and she lay across him with all her weight, and held him down, and told him she was sorry. She was so sorry. And that it was almost done, and that he had to live. He had to. Because she was not going to be alone again. She refused. She absolutely refused. He stopped screaming. He breathed in ragged gulps, and then incredibly, he laughed, a cracked, broken thread of a laugh. "You cauterized me," he wheezed. "With my own knife. Where'd you learn that?" "A book." Course it was a book. His hand found hers and gripped it. "Kent's commentaries teach field surgery too." "Shut up and let me bandage you." She bandaged him. She kept the fire high. And through the long gray morning, she sat with his head in her lap, and she did the thing she had not let herself do in 4 years, which was to talk to another human being about the whole weight of her heart, with nothing held back. "I heard him," she said, quietly watching the fire. "In the tunnel, that man calling my name. He knew about the watch, Elias. He knew to ask for it. 5 men climbed this mountain in winter and walked straight to your cabin, and knew my name, and knew exactly what I carry." She stroked his gray hair back from his forehead. "Someone told them. Someone who knew where I was and what I had. And there is only one person in the whole world who could know both those things and still be alive." Elias's eyes opened. "Your brother, Daniel." The name hurt her mouth. "The entry in the watch dated 2 months ago in my father's cipher. He's alive and he's close, and now these men come knowing everything, and I can't." "Elias, I can't make it be anything but what it looks like." Her voice broke. "It looks like my own brother sold me. It looks like he's been out there for 4 years, part of Crowley's machine. And when he finally learned his little sister was still breathing with the watch against her heart, he sent men to take it off my corpse." "Or," Elias said. "Or what? There is no or." "Or," Elias said again patiently, a marshal working a case even flat on his back with a hole burned shut in his side. "He's been inside Crowley's machine for 4 years the way I was inside the tunnel just now. Trapped in it. Trying to work it from the inside. Adding names to a ledger he shouldn't have access to in a cipher. Only he and his dead father and his lost sister could read like a man leaving a message in a bottle for the one person left alive who might find it. You don't know it's betrayal, Evelyn. You only know it's your brother. Those aren't the same thing. I, of all men, know they aren't the same thing, because for 4 years the whole world knew Elias Boone was a thief, and the whole world was wrong." Evelyn stared at him. The fire popped. "You always do that," she said thickly. "You always find the door I can't see. How do you do that?" "Because I've been the man everybody read wrong," he said. "So I've learned not to read anybody the easy way." His hand tightened on hers. "We'll find your brother. Alive or crooked or trapped or dead. We'll find out which, and you'll know the truth of him, I promise you that. But not today. Today we've got to get down off this mountain because whoever sent those 5 will send 50, and next time they'll bring enough powder of their own to open this whole ridge like a tin can." By afternoon he could stand. By dusk he could walk slow and gray, and leaning on a staff she cut for him, and they went down the mountain the hard way, the east way, the way the killers had come up, because it was the last way anyone would expect them to go. They walked all night. Evelyn carried both guns and the watch and half of Elias's weight, and somewhere in the small dark hours, footsore and frozen, and more tired than she had ever been in her life, she understood that she was not carrying a burden. She was carrying a partner. And there was a difference, and the difference was everything. Near dawn they reached a line shack Elias knew empty for the winter, and they broke in and lit no fire for fear of smoke, and lay down in the cold on old horse blankets, and Evelyn thought Elias was asleep until he spoke. "When you cauterized me," he said into the dark, "you said a thing. You said you weren't going to lose everyone you loved twice." Evelyn went very still. "I heard it clear," Elias said. "Through the screaming and all. I heard it. The dark was total. She was glad of it. Under cover of it, she reached up slowly and unpinned the veil and let it fall away from her face for the first time in front of another living soul in 4 years. He couldn't see her. That was the mercy of the dark, and the reason she could do it at all. "I don't say things I don't mean," she said. "You know that about me. I told you the first night. I don't lie." "No," Elias said softly. "You don't. So I'm not going to lie about this either." Her heart was going to break her ribs. "I love you, Elias Boone. I don't know when it happened. Somewhere between the axe and the tunnel. I love you, and I'm terrified of it, because everyone I have ever loved has been taken from me in fire and blood, and loving you feels like painting a target on your back, and I have already lost you once tonight in the snow, and I cannot do that again. I haven't got it in me. So I need you to be careful. I need you to stop stepping in front of guns. I need—" "Evelyn?" "What?" "Come here." She crossed the dark shack. She found him by touch. And he reached up in the blackness, and he did not reach for the wound in his side, he reached for her face, the burned side, the side no living person had touched in 4 years, and he laid his rough palm against the ruined skin of her cheek, as gently as a man handles something holy, and she flinched. The old flinch, the flinch of 4 years, and he did not pull away. "This," he said, his thumb moving slow across the scars, "this right here. This is where you went in for your father. This is the proof of the bravest thing anybody ever did. You've been hiding the best part of yourself under that veil, Evelyn Harper. It's not the cursed part, it's the true part. And I never saw an ugly woman in my life. I only see the bravest one I ever stood next to." His voice went rough. "I love you too. God knows I do. Have since the act's likely. I was just too much a coward to say it before a man shot me and made the time feel short." She kissed him in the dark. She kissed the man who had bought her for $10 and given her back her face, her name, her father, and a war worth fighting. And he kissed her back, careful of his wound and careful of nothing else. And for a little while, in a freezing shack on the run from killers, two people the world had thrown away held on to each other like the only warm thing left on earth, because that was exactly what they were. When it was done, they lay tangled in the old blankets, and she kept her hand on his heart to count it beating. "I have to ask you something," Elias said, "and I need you to think before you answer, because the answer decides everything we do next. Ask. We could run." He said it quietly. "West. Tonight. There's country out past the divide where a man and a woman can lose themselves so deep that no cattle baron, no crooked judge, no congressman in Washington will ever find them. We take the watch, we go. We build a life in some valley, nobody's named yet, and we let the truth die with the mountain we just brought down. I want you to know that's a real door. It's open. Plenty of good people have walked through it, and I'd walk through it with you, and never once look back if that's what you wanted, and I'd call it a good life and mean it." Evelyn was quiet for a long time. "But," she said. "But," Elias agreed. "But if we run, Crowley wins. And the judge who framed me keeps his robe. And the commissioners keep their offices. And every family Crowley ruined stays ruined. And your father's murder stays an accident, a knocked-over lamp so sad. And your brother, whatever he is, stays out there alone in the dark. And someday, some other girl gets put up on some other auction block because the men who eat this whole country alive never once had to answer for a single bite. That's what running costs. I want you to know that too, before you choose. Both doors. Honest, that's all I've ever promised you. Honest." Evelyn sat up in the dark. She found the watch where it lay against her heart. She thought about her father, who had bought the tickets to Washington and never used them. She thought about Sam Reed dying in a shack, believing he'd lost. She thought about her own face under 4 years of linen. And when she spoke, her voice did not shake at all. "We're not running," she said. "We're going back to Silver Ridge." "Evelyn, you said it yourself 3 weeks ago, at your own table. You said the only way to fight a man that powerful is to fight him where everyone's watching. Too big to kill, you said. Too loud to bury." She turned toward where his voice was in the dark. "So that's what we do. We don't sneak the watch to some marshal who'll be bought before the ink dries. We don't whisper it in Washington where Thorne can smother it in his own house. We bring it home. To the town that sold me for $10. To the square where they threw an apple at me and called me cursed. We wait for the biggest day. The loudest crowd, every investor and judge and businessman in one place. And I walk into the middle of it with my face bare and my father's watch in my hand. And I read Nathan Crowley's crimes to the whole valley at once so loud and so public that not God nor Thorne nor the devil himself can put it back in the dark." The shack was silent. "You understand what you're saying?" Elias said finally. "You'd be walking into the one place on earth where every man wants you dead, willingly, in the open. I understand exactly what I'm saying. They'll try to kill you before you get 3 words out. Then it's a good thing," Evelyn said, "that I'm married to a United States Deputy Marshal who taught me to shoot scared." She heard Elias let out a long breath in the dark, and then she heard the thing she'd been half afraid she'd never hear again. She heard him laugh, low and real and alive. "Former Marshal," he said. "No," Evelyn said, and she found his scarred hand in the dark and held it hard. "Not former, not anymore. The badge was never theirs to take, Elias. It was yours. It's still yours. And when we walk back into that town, you're going to walk in wearing it because the man who clears your name isn't going to be some stranger with a warrant. It's going to be you. You're going to stand in that square a lawman again, in front of everyone who called you a thief, and Sam Reed is going to be right the way he always was, and the whole valley is going to know it." For the second time that night in the dark, Elias Boone wept silently, the way strong men weep when something they buried a long time ago is dug up alive. "All right," he said when he could speak. "All right, Evelyn Harper. We go home. We finish it. We finish it." They lay back down. Outside, the first gray of true morning began to seep under the shack's door. Neither of them slept. There was too much to plan and not enough time. And somewhere down in the valley below them, a cattle baron was learning that 5 of his men had gone up a mountain and not one had come back down, and was reaching for a telephone and beginning to understand that the cursed woman he'd thought long dead was not only alive, but coming. And in the last dark before dawn, as they lay working out the shape of the trap they would build, Evelyn said one more thing, quiet almost to herself. "When we get to Silver Ridge," she said, "there's a man I have to see first. Before the square, before any of it. Sheriff Samuel Reed's brother still keeps the smithy at the edge of town. Elias Sam had a brother, and Sam's brother has been sending letters, for 2 years, to an address my brother Daniel used to use back before everything. I found one once in the ash of it all, and I never understood why a blacksmith in Silver Ridge would be writing to my dead brother's old address." She turned her head toward Elias in the dark. "Unless my brother isn't dead, and isn't gone, and has been closer to home this whole time than either of us could ever have guessed." Elias said nothing for a moment. Then very quietly, in the voice of a man who has just felt the whole shape of a case turn over and show him a face he did not expect, he said one word: "Home." And outside the shack, the sun came up red over the valley of Silver Ridge, and the reckoning that had been 4 years coming began at last to walk down the mountain toward the town that had started it all. Editing this message will create a new conversation branch. You can switch between branches using the arrow navigation buttons. The smithy stood dark at the edge of town, and Evelyn knocked in a pattern she did not know she remembered, until her knuckles were already doing it 2 slow, 3 fast, 1 slow. The knock her father used to rap on her bedroom door when she was small. The knock that meant it's only me. It's safe. The door opened 4 inches on a chain. One eye looked out. An old eye in an old face gone gray at the temples with a blacksmith's burn scars up one forearm. "We're closed," the old man said. "Come back in daylight." "I'm not here for horseshoes," Evelyn said. "I'm here because you've been writing letters for 2 years to a dead girl's dead brother, and I want to know why a man does that." The eye went wide. The chain rattled off. The door came open, and the old blacksmith stood there staring at her like she was a ghost, walked up out of the ground, which she supposed to him she was. "Lord have mercy," he breathed. "You're her. You're Thomas Harper's girl. You're alive." "Where's my brother?" Evelyn said. "Where's Daniel?" The old man's eyes filled. He looked past her at the huge gray-faced man leaning on the staff, and something in Elias's bearing, some marshal's stamp that 11 years on a mountain hadn't worn off, made the blacksmith's mouth fall open a second time. "And you?" he whispered. "You're Boone. You're the marshal they hanged in every man's mind but never could catch. My brother swore to his last breath you were innocent. Sam Reed died saying your name." He stepped back, held the door wide. "Get in. Get in off the street, both of you, before somebody with Crowley's coin in his pocket sees you standing there. Get in, and I'll tell you everything, God help us all. I'll tell you everything I've kept 2 years." They went in. He barred the door. And the blacksmith, whose name was Josiah Reed, told them the thing that broke the last piece of the case wide open. "Your brother came to me 2 years ago," Josiah said, pouring coffee with a hand that shook. In the night, same as you, half-starved, scared out of his mind. He'd been inside Crowley's operation 4 years bookkeeping, same as your daddy. That's a Harper gift. Ain't it the ledgers, but he wasn't in it willing, miss. Understand that first before anything. Crowley found him a year after the fire. Found out Thomas Harper had a son who could read the books, and Crowley put a gun to the boy's head and a choice in front of him. Keep our accounts or die like your father did. And Daniel... The old man's voice cracked. Daniel chose to live, and he's hated himself for it every day since. But he didn't just keep their books, miss. He copied them. In your daddy's cipher. Line by line, 4 years right under Crowley's nose, building the case all over again from the inside, praying to God that someday it'd reach a hand that could use it. The entries in that watch you carry, the new ones, that's him. He's been finding ways to get them to you for 2 years through me, through anyone chasing rumors of a scarred woman who might be his sister still breathing. Evelyn's coffee cup rang against the table as she set it down too hard. He wasn't selling me, she said. It came out a whisper. Elias. He wasn't selling me. He was trying to reach you, Elias said quietly. The message in the bottle. I told you. Where is he now? Evelyn said, turning back to Josiah, and her voice shook for the first time. Where's my brother right now tonight? Josiah Reed's face went gray as ash. That's the trouble, miss, he said. That's the whole trouble. 3 days ago, Crowley figured it out. Figured out his tame accountant had been copying the books. And Crowley didn't kill him. The old man swallowed. He's got him. Alive. In the office above the bank in the square. Because Crowley's no fool, he knows if the boy dies, the copies stop, and he still don't know where all the copies went. So he's keeping Daniel breathing just long enough to find every last page and burn it. And in 2 days, miss, there's the biggest gathering this town's ever seen, the Territorial Railroad signing every big man in Colorado in one square, Judge Vance presiding, the land commissioners, the investors, all of it. And Crowley means to use the crowd for cover. He means to make an example. He's going to hang your brother in the public square in front of the whole territory and call him a thief and an embezzler and clean his own books with the boy's neck all in one afternoon, with 100 witnesses who'll swear justice was done. He looked up. You came home 2 days before they hang the last of your family, miss. 2 days. That's the hand you've been dealt. Boomy, I said to Mrs. The silence in the smithy was absolute. Then Evelyn Harper stood up, and something had changed in her face in the bare, unveiled ruin of it. Some final thing had gone hard and bright and unbreakable. Then we don't have 2 days to build a trap, she said. We have 2 days to build a trap and spring a man from a bank at the same time. She turned to Elias. Can you fight in 2 days? I can fight now. You can barely stand. I said I can fight now. He hauled himself up off the stool by main strength and stood gray and swaying but upright, and there was a light in his eye she hadn't seen even on the mountain. Evelyn, they've got your brother. They've got Sam's killer walking around free, calling himself a judge, and they mean to do it all in the open where the whole world can watch. You know what that is. He almost smiled. That's them making the same mistake we were going to make them make. Too big, too loud, too public. They just built our stage for us. All we've got to do is walk out onto it. The next 2 days moved like a river breaking a dam. Josiah Reed knew everyone Crowley had ruined, and in a town like Silver Ridge, that was half the town. He knew the ranchers who'd lost their land to forged transfers. He knew the widows of men who'd died in Crowley's accidents. He knew the retired sheriff who'd turned in his star rather than serve a bought court, and the telegraph operator who'd copied every crooked wire for 3 years, and kept the copies in a coffee tin against a day he never thought would come. One by one in the dark, Josiah brought them to the smithy, and one by one, Evelyn showed them the watch and read them a single line of what it held, and watched 4 years of fear turn slowly in face after face into something that had teeth. You've all been afraid a long time, Elias told them the second night the smithy packed with grim, silent people. I know that fear. I lived on a mountain 11 years because of it. Fear of a man so big the law itself works for him. But here's the thing about a man that big. He held up the watch. Everything that makes him big is written down. Every dollar, every bribe, every murder. Big men keep books because big men can't hold it all in their heads, and the bigger they get, the more they have to write down. And Nathan Crowley wrote down everything, and a Harper copied every word. He's not big, he's just heavy. And heavy things fall hardest. He laid out the plan. It was not complicated. The best ones never were. At the signing, when the square was fullest, and every powerful man in the territory stood exposed in one place, Evelyn would walk in. Barefaced, alone to every eye. She would go straight to the platform where Crowley and the judge and the commissioners sat, and she would produce the watch, and she would begin to read loud to the whole crowd, names and dates and dollars so fast and so public that no bullet could put it back. That was the bait, because Crowley could not let her live 3 sentences into it. He would signal his men, and the moment he did, the moment armed men moved on an unarmed, scarred woman reading from a watch in front of the whole territory, every ruined rancher and grieving widow and disgusted honest man Josiah had gathered would see with their own eyes exactly who Nathan Crowley was. The crowd itself would turn. And in the chaos of the turning, Elias and the retired sheriff and 2 of the ranchers would take the bank and free Daniel and bring him out into the square. Alive, the living copyist beside his sister, with the watch, 2 Harpers standing where Crowley meant to hang the last one. It hangs on one thing, Elias said. It hangs on Crowley reaching for his gun in front of everyone. If he stays cold, if he lets her read and just has her arrested quiet later, the whole thing falls apart. We need him hot. We need him to lose his temper in front of the whole valley. He'll lose it, Evelyn said quietly. You can't know that. I can. She touched the bare, scarred side of her face. Because I'm going to make it personal. I'm not just going to read his books to him, Elias. I'm going to tell the whole square that Nathan Crowley sent 4 men to burn a sleeping family alive over a ledger, and that one of them threw the lamp that did this to my face, and that I have carried the proof against my heart for 4 years waiting for this exact morning. A man like Crowley can stand being called a thief. Thieves get rich. But I'm going to call him a coward who makes war on sleeping children in front of every man whose respect he's spent a fortune buying. He won't be able to bear it. He'll reach. Her jaw set. I know how to bait a proud man. I've been baited by them my whole life. The morning of the signing came clear and cold. The square filled as it had not filled in the town's history. Investors in eastern suits. Ranchers and miners in from 100 miles. Judge Harlan Vance on the platform in his black robe, and beside him, the 2 land commissioners, Pruitt and Wallace, and at the center of them all, in a coat that cost more than most men in the square, would see in a year Nathan Crowley big and easy, and smiling a man who had never in his life been made to answer for anything. And off to the side of the platform, where the crowd could see it and take the lesson, a gallows. New built. 1 noose. Empty. For now. Elias took his position by the bank with the retired sheriff and the ranchers, his revolver under his coat, and Evelyn's love. The last thing he'd said goodbye to, though neither had called it goodbye. Josiah's people salted themselves through the crowd. The telegraph man had his coffee tin. And the whole trap held its breath. Then Evelyn Harper walked into the square. She wore no veil. She had not worn a veil since the dark of the line shack, and she would never wear one again. And she walked down the center of the crowded square, with the burned side of her face turned to the morning sun for the whole world to see. And a whisper ran ahead of her, like wind through wheat, and the whisper was her name, and under the whisper was a word, 4 years old. Cursed, cursed, the cursed woman. But she's dead. She died in a fire back east. That can't be her. She reached the foot of the platform. She stopped. And into the spreading silence, she looked up at Nathan Crowley and spoke, and her voice carried to the last row of the square, clear as a struck bell. Nathan Crowley. The big man's smile faltered by a single degree. I don't believe I've had the pleasure, ma'am, he said, easy for the crowd, playing the puzzled gentleman. No, Evelyn said. You never did meet me. You only sent men to my house. 4 of them. On a winter night 4 years ago to a home in the foothills where a federal accountant named Thomas Harper had spent a year writing down every dollar you stole from the United States government. She let it land. You remember Thomas Harper. He's the reason you built this whole beautiful morning, isn't he? To sign away the last of the land you murdered him to get. The square had gone utterly still. Crowley's smile was gone now. This woman is deranged. Someone remove. Your men shot him at his own desk. Evelyn went on louder, riding over him, and she took a step up onto the platform, and no one moved to stop her, because no one yet understood what they were watching. They shot my father, and then they set his house on fire to burn the evidence and burn the family, my mother, myself, 17 years old, asleep in my bed. And when I ran into that fire to save my father's strongbox, one of your men threw a burning lamp at me. She turned. She turned the full ruined side of her face to the crowd, to the investors, to the judge, to the hundreds. This is what your money did, Nathan Crowley. This is the mark of the man you are, and you have walked this valley 4 years a king, while the girl you set on fire carried the proof of it against her heart, waiting for a morning exactly like this one. She held up the watch. It's all in here, she said to the crowd, not to Crowley anymore, to the crowd. Every name, Judge Vance. The black-robed man on the platform jerked as if struck, $600 to sign a false warrant. Commissioner Wallace, $600 more to swear a lie in a courtroom. Commissioner Pruitt, the senator's brother in Denver. Every bribe, every forged transfer of the very land you're all here to sign away this morning. And the murders, the Harpers, and a United States Deputy Marshal named Elias Boone, whose name you dragged through the mud and whose life you stole because he got too close to your books before my father ever did. Her voice rose to fill the whole square. You didn't ruin a Marshal Crowley. You framed an innocent man to protect a fortune you built on murder, and it is all written down. And Nathan Crowley, king of the valley, in front of every powerful man whose respect he had spent 20 years and a fortune buying in front of the investors and the judges and the hundreds of ordinary people, heard a scarred woman he'd thought long dead call him a coward who burned children, and felt the whole edifice of his life begin to tip, and he reached for his gun. Now! Elias roared. Everything happened at once. Crowley's hand came up with a pistol, and Evelyn was moving down and rolling the way Elias had drilled into her 100 times on the frozen ground, and Crowley's shot went where she'd been standing and cracked into the platform. And the crowd screamed and surged because they had seen it. They had all seen it. They had seen Nathan Crowley pull a gun and fire on an unarmed woman who'd done nothing but talk, and in that instant, 4 years of fear turned to 4 years of fury in 100 hearts at once. At the bank, Elias and the sheriff and the ranchers hit the door. There were 2 of Crowley's men on it, and the sheriff took one, and a rancher took the other. And Elias went through and up the stairs 3 at a time, on a body that should not have been able to climb them, driven by nothing but the knowledge that Evelyn's brother was up there with a rope in his future, and he kicked the office door off its lock, and found Daniel Harper bound to a chair, gaunt and beaten and blinking in the sudden light, and a single guard swinging a gun up too slow. And Elias put him down and cut the boy loose in the same motion. Your sister's downstairs, Elias said, hauling him up. She's alive, she's magnificent, and she is single-handedly bringing down the man who took everything from both our families, so we are going to go down there and stand beside her boy right now on your feet. You're Boone, Daniel Harper whispered, swaying. You're the marshal. The one in the watch. Evie found you. My God, she found you. She bought me for $10, Elias said. Long story. Walk. Down in the square, it was chaos, but it was the right kind of chaos. Crowley had fired again and missed again, and now his own hired men were drawing, but Josiah's people were drawing too, and the ranchers and the honest men. And for the first time in 20 years, Nathan Crowley's guns were outnumbered by the guns of the people he'd wronged. Judge Vance was trying to flee the platform, and 2 ranchers had him by the robe. Commissioner Wallace was screaming that he'd been forced, that Crowley had made him do it, that he'd testify to everything, please. And the telegraph man was standing on a barrel, holding his coffee tin over his head and bellowing that he had copies. 3 years of copies of every crooked wire Crowley ever sent. The whole rotten structure was coming down at once, exactly as Thomas Harper's daughter had planned it, too big and too loud and too public to bury. And Nathan Crowley, seeing it fall, did what proud men do when they cannot bear to lose. He turned his gun on the one person who had brought it all down. He turned it on Evelyn on his knees now at the platform's edge, and he took his time. The way his men had taught him, the way cruel men always take their time. And he said loud enough for her to hear over the chaos, "You should have stayed dead." 2 things happened in the same half-second. Elias Boone came out the door of the bank with Daniel behind him, saw Crowley's gun leveled at Evelyn across 40 feet of screaming crowd, and knew, with a marshal's cold clarity, that he was too far away and would not make it in time. And Evelyn Harper, on her knees, drew the revolver Elias had given her from the folds of her dress and shot Nathan Crowley through the heart. 1 shot. Clean. The way she'd blown 6 caps of snow off 6 fence posts in a single breath a lifetime ago on a mountain, with a man watching who'd said she had a gift, and it was a shame she'd never have call to use it. She'd had call. Nathan Crowley looked down at his chest with an expression of vast offended surprise, as if the world had broken a rule it had never once broken for him in all his life. And then the king of the valley fell off his own platform into the mud of the square and did not get up, and the reign of 20 years ended in front of the entire territory at the hand of the woman he had sold for $10 and set on fire and thought long dead. The square went silent. Evelyn knelt at the edge of the platform, the revolver still in her hand, smoke curling from the barrel, and she did not look at the body. She looked up across the crowd, and she found Elias. And she found standing beside him, thin and beaten, and weeping openly, a face she had not seen since she was 6 years old and had believed she would never see again. "Daniel," she said. She could not make it louder than a breath. "Danny." Her brother crossed the square to her, stumbling, and she came down off the platform, and they met in the open space where Crowley had meant to hang the last of the Harpers, and they held on to each other. The 2 children of Thomas Harper, the only 2 left, and 4 years of grief and guilt and fear broke over both of them at once, and they wept in the middle of the silent square in the sight of the whole valley, and neither one of them cared who watched. "I thought you sold me," Evelyn sobbed into his shoulder. "The entries, the cipher, I thought Danny. I thought you'd sold me to him." "I was screaming for you." Daniel wept. 4 years, every page I copied, I was screaming for you, Evie. I was throwing every word I could into the dark, praying it'd reach you. I never knew if you were alive. I never knew. I'm alive. I'm alive. And I found the marshal, and I brought it home. Danny, I brought it all the way home. Behind them, the law arrived at last. But it was not Crowley's law. Federal marshals had ridden in on the tail of the chaos summoned 2 days before by a telegram. The telegraph operator had finally, after 3 years of copying crooked wires in silence, worked up the courage to send clean a telegram to Denver, to a federal circuit that had waited 4 years for one shred of hard evidence against the Colorado ring, and had just been handed a watch full of it in front of 100 witnesses. Judge Vance was put in irons in his own robe. Wallace and Pruitt were taken babbling and turning on each other and on every man above them. The forged land transfers were seized before the ink of the morning's signing had fully dried, and a senior federal marshal, an old man with a white mustache who had known Elias Boone before the fall and had never fully believed the charges, walked across the square to where the huge gray-faced man stood, swaying on his feet, holding his wounded side, watching the reunion of the 2 people he'd risked everything to reunite. "Boone," the old marshal said. Elias turned. "Sir?" The old man looked at him a long moment. Then he looked at the watch in Evelyn's hand, and the judge in irons, and the dead king in the mud, and the whole 4-year lie coming apart in the cold morning light. "There's a note in that ledger clears you," the old marshal said gruffly. "Woman read it out to the whole square. $600 paid to Wallace to swear you took a bribe. It's over, son. Whatever they took from you, it's coming back. The badge, the pension, the name, all of it. Sam Reed was right about you. Sam Reed was right the whole time." His voice roughened. "I'm sorry it took us 4 years and a scarred girl with a dead man's watch to see it. But it's over. You're a marshal again, Elias, if you want it." Elias Boone did not answer for a moment. He was looking at Evelyn across the square, kneeling in the mud with her brother. Her ruined face turned up to the sun and streaming with tears and more beautiful than anything he had ever seen in his life. "Sam would have liked her," he said quietly. It was not really an answer to the marshal. It was to Sam. Then Evelyn looked up and found his eyes across the whole ruined, shining morning, and she held out one hand to him, still kneeling, still holding her brother with the other arm. And Elias Boone walked across the square that had sold her for $10 past the body of the man who'd burned her family through the crowd, that had once thrown an apple and called her cursed, and now fell silent and made way, and he went down on his knees in the mud beside the two Harpers, and gathered both of them in against his wounded side and held on. "You did it," he said into her hair. "You brought it home, every bit of it. Your father would—" "We did it," Evelyn said fiercely. "All of us, Danny, Sam's brother, every ruined soul in this valley, you, especially you." She pulled back and looked at him, at the gray in his beard and the pain in his side and the light finally back in his eyes. "It's over, Elias. It's really over. They can't call you a thief anymore. They can't call me cursed. They can't call Danny a traitor. It's over, and we're all still standing, and—" Her voice broke. "And I don't have to run anymore. I've been running for 4 years and I don't have to run anymore." "No," Elias said. "You don't." He touched the burned side of her face there in the middle of the square in front of the whole valley gently, the way he'd touched it in the dark of the line shack, and this time she did not flinch at all. "You're home. Evelyn Harper. You're finally home." Around them the square was filling with sound again, the roar of 100 people realizing all at once that the thing that had ruled their lives for 20 years was dead in the mud, that the fear was over, that the honest men had won. Somewhere a woman was cheering. Somewhere a man was weeping for a son Crowley had killed. The federal marshals moved through the crowd making their arrests. And in the center of it all, 3 people who had each been thrown away by the world, a framed marshal, a scarred woman, a broken accountant, knelt together in the cold, bright morning, holding on while the town of Silver Ridge learned all at once and forever that the girl they had sold for $10 in gold had come home carrying the truth, and the truth had set the whole valley free. Daniel lifted his head from his sister's shoulder and looked at the watch still clutched in her hand, the dented gold watch that did not tell time, that had held their father's last work against her heart for 4 cold years. "There's one thing left," he said hoarsely. "One name in the book you haven't spoken yet, Evie. The initials. The one Father couldn't prove." Evelyn went very still, her hand closed around the watch. Across the square, being led away in irons, Commissioner Wallace was still babbling, still turning, still trading every name he had for his own skin. And his voice rose suddenly clear over the crowd, cracking with terror, shouting at the federal marshals, a thing that made the old white-mustached lawman stop dead in his tracks and turn around slow. "It wasn't just Crowley," Wallace was screaming. "You think Crowley was the top. Crowley was nothing. Crowley took his orders, same as the rest of us. There's a man in Washington, there's a man who ate this whole territory, and you're all too small to even see him. I'll give him to you. I'll give you the name. Just don't put me in a cell where his men can reach me. Please God, don't—" And then Wallace's voice cut off, all at once. Mid-word, a single shot from somewhere in the crowd, from no direction anyone could name. And Commissioner Wallace pitched forward into the mud, with a red bloom spreading across his back, dead before he hit the ground. The name he'd been about to speak, dying in his throat, forever. The square erupted into screaming and scattering. The federal marshals spun guns drawn, searching the crowd, the rooftops, the alleys. But there was nothing. No shooter, no smoke, no trace. Only a dead man in the mud with a secret still locked behind his teeth. and 100 panicked people and a cold wind coming down off the mountain. Elias Boone rose slowly to his feet, one hand pressed to his wounded side, his marshal's eyes moving over the rooftops, and his face had gone hard and still, in a way Evelyn had only seen once before. The night 5 men climbed the mountain in the dark. "Somebody just silenced him," he said quietly, so only the 2 Harpers could hear. In front of 40 federal witnesses, clean, gone. That's not Crowley's kind of work. Crowley's dead in the mud with his gun in his hand like a fool. He looked down at Evelyn and at the watch in her hand, at the one entry she had never decoded aloud, the initials A.C.T. The note in her father's hand. There is someone above him, someone in Washington, and that man is the one who will kill us all. "Your father was right," Elias said softly. "Crowley was never the top of it." And high above the square on the ridge road that led down from the mountains unseen by anyone in the screaming crowd below, a lone rider in an expensive coat sat a fine horse and watched the town of Silver Ridge come apart, and then unhurried turned his mount east toward Denver, toward the railroad toward Washington, and rode away. The dead man in the mud was not the end of it, and Elias Boone knew it before the crowd had even stopped screaming. He knelt beside Commissioner Wallace's body, while the federal marshals shouted and searched the rooftops, and he looked at the single wound in the man's back, and he stood up slow, one hand on his own bandaged side, and he said the thing nobody else in the square was ready to hear. "That shot came from up high and east," he told the old white-mustached marshal. "From the Ridge Road, a man who could make that shot at that distance into a crowd of 40 lawmen and vanish before the smoke cleared. That's not a hired gun. That's a soldier, a professional. Somebody sent him for one purpose, to shut Wallace's mouth the second it opened, which means whoever sent him was listening close enough to know the exact moment Wallace started to break." He looked at the old marshal. "Somebody's been watching this whole square the whole time, watching us win. And the moment our winning got close to a name he can't afford spoken, he reached down out of the sky and erased it." The old marshal's face was gray. "You're saying Crowley wasn't—" "I'm saying Nathan Crowley is dead in the mud with his gun in his hand, and a United States land commissioner just got shot through the heart for the crime of almost saying who Crowley worked for." Elias's voice was flat and cold. "Crowley was the hand. We cut off the hand today. But there's a head, and the head is still on its shoulders, and the head just proved it can kill any one of us any time it likes in broad daylight in front of the law itself." He turned. "Where's Evelyn?" She was already moving. While the men talked, Evelyn Harper had done what her father's daughter always did. She had gone to the paper. She was kneeling in the mud with the watch open, and the last undecoded entry smoothed flat on her knee. And Daniel was beside her, and the 2 of them were reading their father's final cipher together for the first time in their lives. The shifting key passing between them, the way it had when they were children, and it was only a game. "It's not just initials," Daniel breathed. "Evie, look, Father left more here than the initials. He was careful. He always said a name you can't prove is a name that gets you killed, so he didn't write the name. He wrote where the proof is." Evelyn's finger moved across the tiny figures. Her lips moved. And then she went absolutely still and looked up, and her ruined face had gone white as the snow on the mountain. "There's a second ledger," she said. Elias crossed to her. "A second, Father knew the watch might be found. He knew a cipher could be cracked given time, so he split it." She held up the paper with a hand that shook. "Everything in the watch, everything I've carried 4 years, all of it proves Crowley. The bribes, the murders, the land. But the man above Crowley, the man in Washington, the one whose gun just silenced Wallace's father, never trusted a single copy to hold that proof. He hid the real ledger, the master book, the one with the true name and the true accounts of the man at the top. And in the watch, in this last entry, he wrote down where." "Where?" Elias said. "Where is it?" Evelyn looked at her brother. Daniel looked at his sister. And something passed between them, some old shared knowledge from a childhood before the fire, and it was Daniel who answered in a whisper, in a voice full of wonder and grief. "Home," Daniel said. "The old house? What's left of it? Father hid it in the one place no one would ever dig because everyone believed there was nothing left there but ash and bones." He looked at Elias. He hid the master ledger under the hearthstone of the house they burned, under the very fire that was supposed to destroy everything. 4 years it's been sitting there under the ruin, under the ash 20 feet from where they murdered him, waiting. The old marshal had come close enough to hear. He stood there in the mud, an old lawman who had thought this morning's work was the end of the biggest case of his career and understood now that it was only the beginning of a bigger one. "Then we ride for it," he said. "Tonight, before whoever's up on that ridge figures out the same thing you just did." "He already knows," Elias said quietly. Everyone looked at him. "Think," Elias said. He silenced Wallace because Wallace was about to speak the name, which means the name is the thing he protects above all else, which means he spent 4 years making certain there is no proof of the name anywhere in the world. He'd have torn Crowley's whole operation apart looking for it. And the one place he could never search, the one place he'd have written off as empty ash, same as everyone else. Elias met the old marshal's eyes. He knows there was a Thomas Harper who tracked everything. He knows the watch exists now because we just read half of it to the whole territory. And he is smart enough and afraid enough to wonder tonight whether a man as careful as Thomas Harper kept a second book. He'll go to the house, maybe not tonight, but he'll go. And if he gets there first, the master ledger goes in a fire, same as the first one did, and the man at the top of it all dies old and beloved and untouched. The first governor of the state of Colorado, and everything we did today buys the valley one dead cattle baron and nothing more. The square was quiet around them now. The bodies were being covered. The prisoners were in irons. But the 3 who had brought it all down stood in a tight knot, and the fight was not over, and every one of them knew it. "Then we don't wait for tonight," Evelyn said. "We ride now." They rode within the hour. Elias should not have been on a horse at all with the wound in his side, and Evelyn told him so, and he told her that a man could mend, or a man could finish a thing. But he'd yet to meet the man who could do both. Sitting down, and she stopped arguing because she recognized her own words turned back on her. The old marshal came, and 2 of his men and Daniel, who had not been on a horse in 4 years and rode anyway because it was his father's book and his father's murder, and he had spent 4 years copying pages in the dark, and he would be damned if he'd sit in a warm room while the last page was written. They rode east through the fading light toward the foothills, where a family had died, and the whole way Evelyn felt the old fear trying to climb back into her chest, and she pressed her hand flat against the watch, as she had 10,000 times in 4 years, and this time she did not say, "Not yet." This time she said, "Soon. Soon it ends. Soon I can set you down." The house was exactly as terrible as she remembered and worse for 4 years of weather. Blackened timbers. A chimney standing alone against the dusk like a gravestone, which was what it was. She had not been back since the night she crawled out of it burning. She sat her horse at the edge of the old yard and could not for a moment make herself go closer, and it was Elias who brought his horse up beside hers, not touching her just there, just present the way he had learned she needed. "You don't have to be the one," he said quietly. "Daniel can lift the stone. You can wait here. There's no shame in it. Some ground a person shouldn't have to walk twice." Evelyn looked at the ruin of her childhood home. She looked at the chimney and the hearth beneath it, where her mother had cooked and her father had read aloud on winter nights, and the 3 of them had played a cipher game that turned out in the end to be the most important thing any of them ever did. "No," she said. "It has to be me. He hid it for me. The whole watch, the whole cipher, all of it. He built it for the one child he thought might survive. I owe him the last stone." She swung down off the horse. "Danny, come with me. We lift it together. Same as we read it together. That's how Father would want it. Both his children. Both still here." They walked into the ruin together. The 2 Harpers over the threshold. Their parents had died behind, across the buckled floor to the cold hearth, and they knelt on either side of the great flat hearthstone their father had laid himself the year Evelyn was born, and they worked their fingers into the ash-choked seam, and together straining, they lifted it. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth against 4 years of damp, dry, and whole, and waiting, lay a book. The Master Ledger, Thomas Harper's true book. The real accounting of the man at the top. Evelyn lifted it out with both hands, as if it were made of glass, and she unwrapped the oilcloth, and she opened it, and there, on the first page in her father's careful hand, was the name he had been too wise to write. In the watch, the name Wallace had died rather than be allowed to speak the name of the man on the ridge, the man in the expensive coat, the man riding east toward Washington and a governor's chair. Augustus Crane Thorne, and below the name in her father's hand, a single line that made Evelyn's breath catch and Daniel's head bow, a message left 4 years ago by a man who knew he was going to die and wrote anyway. Wrote for whichever child might one day kneel at this hearth and lift this stone. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have lived, and you are braver than I ever was. Finish it. Not with a gun, with the truth. The truth is the only thing his money cannot buy and his men cannot kill. Bring it into the light, where all men can see, and no darkness in Washington or anywhere else can put it back. I love you. Both of you, if God is kind. Your father. Evelyn read it aloud, her voice breaking, and when she finished, no one in the ruined house spoke for a long moment. Then the old marshal took off his hat, and the 2 younger marshals took off theirs, and even Elias bowed his gray head, and in the burned-out shell of the Harper home, 5 people stood in silence for a man who had beaten the most powerful criminal in the West with nothing but a careful hand and a cipher taught to his children as a game. With the truth, Evelyn said at last, wiping her face, holding the master ledger against her heart, the way she had held the watch. Not with a gun. All right, father. All right. We do it your way. And they did. It took months. It was not a shootout, and it did not end in the mud of a square. It ended the way Thomas Harper had wanted it to end, in the light in front of everyone too big and too loud and too documented to bury. The master ledger delivered under federal guard to a circuit court in Denver and then to a Senate committee in Washington that had been waiting years for exactly this, named Augustus Crane Thorne as the true architect of the entire Colorado land fraud, the man who had used Nathan Crowley as his hand and a dozen judges and commissioners as his fingers, who had ordered the murder of Thomas Harper, who had ordered the framing of a marshal named Elias Boone, and who had, in the very hour of his exposure, ordered a soldier on a ridge to put a bullet through a man about to speak his name. Thorne fought it, of course. Men like Thorne always fight it, and they have every advantage, and for a while it looked as though he might win the way he had always won, by owning the men who would judge him. But Thomas Harper had been right about the one thing that mattered. The truth was, the one thing his money could not buy. It was in the ledger in the dead man's own careful hand, and it had been read into the record in open court before it could be silenced, and there were too many witnesses now. Too many honest men. Josiah Reed had gathered. Too many ruined ranchers and grieving widows, willing to travel to Washington and swear to what Crowley's machine had cost them. The telegraph man came with his coffee tin of copied wires. Daniel Harper came the accountant who had spent 4 years copying the enemy's books from the inside and testified for 3 days without once looking away. And Evelyn Harper came barefaced and told a Senate committee of the United States what the man's money had done to a sleeping family and to a 17-year-old girl's face. And she did not wear a veil, and she did not lower her eyes, and when a lawyer for Thorne suggested gently that a disfigured and traumatized woman's memory of a 4-year-old night might not be reliable, she looked at him for a long moment, and then held up the master ledger and said, "You're right. My memory is only a woman's memory. But my father's arithmetic is a matter of record, and arithmetic doesn't forget, and it doesn't get frightened, and it can't be shot on the way to the witness stand. Read the numbers. The numbers were never traumatized. The numbers simply are." And the room was silent, and the lawyer sat down, and he did not stand up again. Augustus Crane Thorne, the man who was to have been the first governor of Colorado, was convicted on the strength of a dead accountant's second ledger and a scarred woman's steady voice. He did not die old and beloved and untouched. He died a prisoner, disgraced his name a byword across the West for exactly the kind of buried evil that the frontier was supposed to have no room for. The soldier on the ridge was never found. Some things the truth cannot reach. But the head came off the shoulders all the same, and the machine that had eaten a territory for 20 years was finally wholly dead. And Elias Boone got his badge back. The old white-mustached marshal did it himself in Denver, in front of the whole circuit, pinning the star back onto the coat of the man they had branded a thief 4 years before. There was talk of a post for him, a good one, a senior post, the kind of position a wronged man is owed. Elias Boone thanked them and turned it down. "I've done my fighting," he told the old marshal. "I found the one thing worth coming down off my mountain for, and I'd like to go back up it now if it's all the same to you. Keep the star, though." He touched it. Not for the work. Just so a man knows at the end that he was who he always said he was. That's worth more than the pension. You can keep the pension too, come to that. Give it to Sam Reed's brother. That old man kept the faith longer than any of us. They did not fully understand him. Men who had spent their lives climbing toward posts and pensions rarely understand a man who turns and walks back toward a cabin. But Evelyn understood, and that was the only understanding Elias Boone had ever needed. Because the land came back too. That was the part that stunned the whole valley. When the forged transfers were unwound and the stolen federal grants returned to their rightful accounting, it emerged that Thomas Harper's estate, the murdered auditor's estate, had legal claim to a vast tract of the very land Crowley and Thorne had killed to steal. And Thomas Harper's only heirs were his 2 surviving children. Overnight, Evelyn Harper, the woman who had been sold on an auction block for $10 in gold, the cursed woman, the woman nobody would touch, became one of the wealthiest landowners in western Colorado. The whole territory waited to see what she would do with it. They expected her to leave. They expected the mansion in Denver, the fine clothes, the Eastern doctors, for her face the life a fortune buys. It was what anyone would have done. It was what she had every right in the world to do. She did not do it. She kept enough to live on, and no more, and the rest she gave away, and she gave it away with the same careful arithmetic her father had brought to a ledger. She found the families Crowley had ruined, the ranchers driven off their land, the widows of the men who died in his convenient accidents, and she deeded the land back to them parcel by parcel, name by name. And where the rightful owners were dead, she gave it to their children, and where there were no children, she gave it to the town itself. She rebuilt the orphanage where she had been sent after the fire, the place that had eventually sold her off an auction block, and she did not rebuild it out of forgiveness exactly, but out of something harder and better than forgiveness, out of the plain refusal to let another frightened child stand where she had stood. She endowed it so that no child would ever again be traded to a stranger to keep from freezing. She built a school. She built a clinic and staffed it, and made sure it would go to the mountain settlements that never saw a doctor. And she did it all quietly through Josiah Reed and the honest men without her name on any of it, because her father had taught her that the good you do for the sake of your name isn't good. It's just a slower kind of theft. And Daniel stayed. The accountant who had survived by keeping the enemy's books stayed in Silver Ridge and kept the town's books, instead honest ones, and married a school teacher within the year, and slowly, page by page, in the plain daylight work of small, honest sums, he wrote himself back into a man who could sleep at night. He and Evelyn never again played the cipher game. They didn't need to. The game had done what their father built it to do, and it could rest now the way their father could finally rest, the way the whole valley could finally rest. Then in the spring, when the snow came off the high country and the passes opened, Evelyn Harper went home. Not to a mansion in Denver, not to the fine life a fortune buys. She went up the mountain, up the hard trail she had first climbed as a frightened bride behind a huge silent stranger leading a mule. And this time she climbed it as a free woman. And this time there was a man waiting at the top who had built over the long winter of her absence a wide new porch across the front of the little cabin, a porch that looked out over the whole valley all the way down to the town of Silver Ridge, small and distant and no longer able to touch her. Elias Boone met her in the yard where the fence posts still stood, the ones she'd shot the caps of snow off in a single breath the day she showed him what she was. He didn't say much. He never did. He just took her horse and looked at her a long moment and said, "You came back." I told you I would. People say a lot of things at the bottom of a mountain. Different world down there. I wasn't sure the world up here would still look like enough to you. He rubbed the back of his neck, and for the first time since she'd known him, the enormous, fearless man looked almost shy. You could have anything now. Anywhere. Anybody. I know that. I've known it all winter. Evelyn walked up to him. She reached up and laid her hand against the gray of his beard the way he had once laid his hand against the ruin of her cheek in the dark. Elias Boone, she said. You bought me for $10 when I was worth nothing to anyone in the world, including myself. You gave me back my face and my father and my name and a reason to keep breathing. You never once asked me to be anything but exactly what I was. Now I could have anything, anywhere, anybody, and there is not one thing on the whole earth I want except this porch and this valley and you. Her voice was fierce and steady and did not shake. So don't you dare stand there being humble at me. Not after everything. Take me inside. I've been away too long. I want to go home. And Elias Boone Marshall and Mountain Man, framed and cleared alone. 11 years and now alone. No longer took the hand of the woman the world had thrown away and led her up onto the new porch. And they stood together, looking down over the valley they had freed. And after a while, Evelyn Harper reached up and unpinned her veil. She did not need it. She had not worn it in months. But she had kept it the way a soldier keeps an old wound scar. And now standing on the porch beside the only man who had ever seen her clearly, she took the length of linen that had hidden her from the world for 4 years, and she let it fall from her fingers, and the mountain wind caught it and carried it up and out over the valley and away. Not because the scars had gone. They never went. They were with her to the end of her days, half a face marked forever by the night she went into the fire for her father's truth. But the shame was gone. The shame had gone out of her, the way the veil went out over the valley up and away, and gone for good, and it never came back. She stood barefaced in the mountain sun beside the man who loved her, and she understood at last the thing her father had been trying to teach her all along, with a game and a cipher and a book beneath a hearthstone. The greatest secret she had ever carried was never the names in the watch. It was never the master ledger under the ash. It was never Crowley's crimes, or Thorne's, or the proof that cleared an innocent marshal. Those were only paper. The greatest secret was the one it had taken her 4 years and a burned face and a bought marriage and a war against the most powerful men in the West to finally believe that a woman the whole world had declared worthless was worth everything, that a face the whole world called cursed was only brave, and that she had deserved to be loved all along, exactly as she was from the very first moment she stood trembling on that auction block with an apple bursting against her shoulder and not one man willing to bid. She had believed the world's verdict for 4 years. She would never believe it again. Elias put his arm around her careful, the way he did everything, and they watched the sun go down over the valley of Silver Ridge, over the town that had sold her, and the graves of the men who'd wronged her, and the schools and clinics and homes she'd raised in place of all that ruin. And the story of the poor mountain man who took the ugly bride no one wanted became over the years a legend across the Rockies, told and retold at hearths. On winter nights, the way her father had once read aloud on winter nights passed down to daughters and granddaughters, and to every woman who ever looked in a mirror and heard the world's cruel verdict and needed more than anything to hear a truer one. And the legend always ended the same way, with the same 3 plain truths, spoken like an oath, the way Evelyn Harper had learned to speak the truth and never lie. True beauty is revealed by character, not by a face. True love begins with respect and asks for nothing to be hidden, and the people the world throws away are so often the very ones it cannot survive without. Evelyn Harper lived a long life on that mountain, loved every day of it, and died old and unafraid, with her hand in the hand of the man who had seen her worth before she could see it herself. She never wore a veil again. She never needed to. She was home.